Hey, what's up guys? So today we are going to be talking about upper extensions in harmony. So what does that mean? Well, I'm sure you've heard of these before. We're going to talk about 9s, 11s, and 13s, but also how we can flat or sharp them and how it actually changes the color of our voicings. So without further ado, let's dive right into it. So our first upper extension that we're going to discuss is going to be a 9. So what do I mean by a 9? Well, for those of you that don't already know this, be sure to check out my video about basic chord structures. But what we're going to do is we're going to go up a major scale and we're literally going to count up to the 9th degree. So let's say we're in C major. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so the 9 is actually the same thing as the 2, which is D, but up an octave above the fundamental tone. So if we build a C major 9 chord, we're going to play a C major 7, 1, 3, 5, 7, and then we're going to add a 9 on top, right there like that. And that's the most basic C major 9 sound we can get. Now, if we want a C dominant chord with the 9, all we have to do is do the same thing, but we flat the 7. And so on. For a C minor 9, we play a C minor 7 with a 9 on top. And then here's a C half diminished 9. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into diminished chords right now because those are somewhat of their own territory. But if you play diminished, you can add a 9 on top like that and get a really great diminished sound. So next up, let's talk about what it means to flat or sharpen extension. Well, this is going to be especially important when we're talking about dominant chords, okay? So if we said a C major 7 with a flat 9, that's something pretty weird that you aren't going to see because it doesn't sound good. Check it out. It's pretty clashy. You could write it, but it's not something that you would generally see in your average tonal music. Now with that said, a C major 7 with a sharp 9 is actually a pretty interesting sound. I like that a lot better than the flat 9. And could be useful if you also added a sharp 11 and has a very dreamlike quality to it. But that's getting super advanced. So if you want to get advanced and get those weird flat 9 and sharp 9 major tonalities in your ear, I say go for it. But we're going to focus more on dominant chords because a 9th, whether flat or sharp, in a dominant voicing is actually very common. So a C9 voicing, again, built from bottom to top, is C, E, G, B flat, and then D on top, D being the 9. Now, a very common sound you will hear is a C7 with a flat 9. Or, sorry, a dominant 7 with a flat 9, in this case being C7. Now, you actually may not recognize the sound so much in this basic form, but maybe you've heard a sound more like this. Very classic jazz sound. Now, of course, in this voicing, I've added the 13 as well. So if we're in C, the 13 is A, and then we've got the flat 9 on top. So just to be specific, this would be a C13 with a flat 9. Now, part of what makes this chord work so beautifully as a 5 chord, a 5 dominant chord, is that this flat 9 so badly wants to resolve down to the 5 in the next key, okay, which is one of the fundamental tones of that chord. So let's say we're in the key of F here. So that makes C our 5, and then when we get to F, that's going to be our 1. So we're going to do 5, 7 to 1, or in this case, actually, we're going to do C 13 with a flat 9 to F 6, 9. Again, this flat 9 resolves so nicely to C, which is the 5 in F. And as always, the flat 7 resolves beautifully down to 3 in the 1 chord. All right, guys, so next up, let's talk about sharp 9 chords. So in their most basic form, they're gonna sound like this. Just to remind you, that is as opposed to a flat 9, which sounds like this. So these differences can be subtle, especially if you are just getting started with hearing those differences. So don't be discouraged if they sound sort of similar to you. But As you get more familiar with practicing these and learning some more voicings, you will start to hear the difference, and it will start to become really useful for different situations for you in different chord progressions and playing jazz or neo-soul in general. So again, you might recognize the sound of a sharp 9 a bit more if we play a more open voicing. So check this out. So that's a C13 with a sharp 9. So I really love that sound. Another great way to get to 1. So for me, a big difference in these chords is very emotional. So I'm going to talk about this very much in adjectives as opposed to music theory. So for me, a flat 9 is subtle. It's subtly and smoothly pulling you down to the 1 chord, okay? On the other side of the spectrum, for me, you get the sharp 9, which for me is saying much more strongly, get to the 1 chord, okay? So it's a less subtle and understated sound, and it's a bit more abrasive and in your face. Now you guys may be especially accustomed to hearing the sharp 9 when there's also a flat 13, and that is the sound of altered. So the altered scale looks like this. You can see we've got a flat 9, a sharp 9, a sharp 11, a flat 13, flat 7, and 1 here. So this altered scale has a lot of different flatted and sharp extensions, okay? But it is a dominant sound, and it is most obviously characterized by the sharp 9 and the flat 13. So this dominant chord that's got both a sharp 9 and a flat 13 for me is a fairly dark sound, and that's part of why it pulls really well to a 1 minor. In a minor 2-5-1, we'll always see the 2 half diminished to 5 altered to 1 minor 6 or minor major. Okay, now there are 2 more chords I want to go over with you guys today before we finish. The first one is a major 7 sharp 11. So a major 7 sharp 11 looks like this. We got 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, sharp 11. Incidentally, as we're talking about extensions, you can assume that when you have an upper extension, like for example a sharp 11, you are allowed to also put a 9 underneath it if you want. And if it is not specified as a flat 9 or sharp 9, you might as well assume that is just a natural 9. So essentially major 7 with a sharp 11. If you guys have watched my video on modes or just already know about the major modes, you'll recognize this as the sound of Lydian. But it's a very recognizable sound. Oftentimes people end songs on a Lydian chord, or also known as a major 7 sharp 11. All right, our last chord of the day is going to be a dominant 7 with a sharp 11. So this is, again, another sound that you've probably heard many, many times before. Let's look at the key of C again. And what we'll do is this time play our major 7 sharp 11 chord, but with a flat 7, which is a dominant 7 sharp 11 chord. It's kind of got a dreamy sound. Unlike some of the other upper extension dominant chords we talked about, I actually feel like this chord doesn't want to resolve as much. I could actually hang on this chord a bit. And that's probably also partly why it's yet another example of a great ending chord. So if you're playing a blues or a song that ends on a dominant chord, sometimes it's really great to, instead of ending on a normal dominant chord like, end on a dominant chord with a sharp 11. I'm sure you guys have heard that a million times in jazz. All right guys, thanks so much for watching, and I hope you've really enjoyed learning about upper extensions in this video. So I did my best to cover as much information as I could in the limited amount of time we've got here. But I think this should give you a really good foundational understanding of how upper extensions and voicings work, what some of the most common different chords you will see with upper extensions are, and how you can actually use them in a few different contexts. All right, guys, thanks so much, and I will see you next time.